Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Hogwarts, starting from creating the Lord of the Rings. Chapter 1. The fog over Birmingham is the smoke from the Razor Party. 11-year-old Artel stood in front of the window of the second-floor room in the castle of a manor somewhere outside of Birmingham, England, looking at the faint mist in the sky, muttering softly. There was a sense of maturity on his face that was incompatible with his age. This is the 11th year that he has passed through. His name was Artel Thomas Shelby, and his great-grandfather was the famous Tommy Shelby, the greatest leader of the Razor Party ever. Tommy is also called Thomas. Artel's second name is to commemorate him. Of course, this also includes the expectations of the entire Shelby family for him. They hoped that the Shelby boy would have a career, just like Tommy was. Since Tommy's death, the Razor Party began to show its decline. Later, the entire Shelby family fell apart and the infighting dissolved. Artel's grandfather, Tommy's youngest son, returned to Birmingham with some people and inherited 2 bars and a manor. The Shelby family has restless blood flowing in their bodies, and they are cruel gang members at heart, not bosses who run their businesses with peace of mind. Artel's grandfather used the shadow of the Shelby family to set up the Little Razor Party in Birmingham, recruiting hundreds of members and making a big name. And Artel's father, Freddie, was even more talented. After taking over the Shelby family, he dared to fight and he once ruled the entire underground world of Birmingham. It's a pity that Freddie acted a little too unscrupulously, which eventually caused his subordinates, rebellion and official repression. Now that Freddie has been caught in, but even in the prison, Freddie can still control the situation outside. Although there are many gangs in the underground world of Birmingham, most of the forces still maintain their fear of Freddie and respect for the Shelby family. The forces of the Little Razor Party are still one of the best in Birmingham. They occupy the 2 most prosperous neighborhoods in the center of Birmingham, operating a variety of shops and gray industries hidden under the light. The Shelby family's own industry is also huge, including 5 bars in Birmingham, 2 restaurants, a large shopping mall, as well as several factories in the suburbs and a huge winery with an area of 120 hectares. Of course, this does not count the manor where the Shelby family lives today, and a garden castle invested in the outskirts of London. But in the eyes of Freddie and the rest of the Shelby family, the Shelbys today are still incomparable to Tommy's. The family can own the industry today, thanks to the development of industry and economy, and it is not something to be proud of. The Shelby family during Tommy's time had a high status and prestige, and its reputation had spread throughout England. The Razor Party was the most influential gang in England, and it was even internationally renowned. Therefore, each Shelby is responsible for revitalizing the family. Among them, Freddie's only son, Artel, is reported with the greatest expectations. Razor Party. Tommy Shelby. Artel stared silently at the stars. Even though he was a transmigrator, he still felt enormous pressure. He was not an ignorant guy in his previous life, but the education he received had nothing to do with how to revitalize a Sopranos family. Fortunately, with some experience and insight from previous lives, Artel can always show insight and stability far beyond his peers, which is enough to surprise his family who are looking forward to him. It's a pity that you can't control that power, otherwise the pressure will not be so great. Artel sighed. There is a great power in his body. But he is not well controlled and seems to only show up when his mood is fluctuating. It was as if he and his mother were attacked at a restaurant 3 years ago. The bullet was originally aimed at him, but was blocked by his mother. Artel didn't know what was wrong with him. Just watching his mother in this life fall in a pool of blood, an inexplicable power burst out. Then the glasses and plates around him smashed into pieces with a bang, and flew towards the gunman with a roar. The gunman died under broken glass, but Artel's mother also left him. Artel has been trying to control that power, but unfortunately, he has no clue. He thinks this is his gold finger, but he just doesn't know how to use it. Maybe it has something to do with his age. Artel was thinking wildly, and suddenly heard a thumping sound from outside the window, as if someone was banging on the glass. There was a hint of vigilance in Artel's eyes, and he pulled a pistol from a drawer. Who? Artel asked. He was certain that it was definitely not wind outside. But he's on the 2nd floor of the castle now, and who can climb up here and slap his window? Cuckoo. To Artel's surprise, a strange sound came clearly from outside, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. It sounded like an owl's call. Artel remained vigilant. He turned to his side, hid behind the wall, and suddenly opened the curtain. Sure enough, outside the window, a gray-brown owl was flapping against the window. The owl also had a letter in its mouth. Could it be that the gangs did some trick? Or the rest of the family? Artel didn't realize what happened yet, but looking at the owl, it seemed like he wanted to come in. Artel looked at it carefully. The owl didn't look like it was carrying a bomb, thought about it, and opened the window. Cuckoo, the owl whispered, flew into the house, circled the house, and landed on Artel's table. And that letter, floating in the air, miraculously landed in Artel's hand. There was no stamp on the envelope, but a line of words was written on it, a very strange emerald green ink. West Midlands, Shelby Manor on the outskirts of Birmingham, the first room on the left side of the second floor of the central castle, received by Mr. Artel Thomas Shelby. Seeing the words on the envelope, Artel's face showed a hint of surprise, and then he seemed to think of something, and turned the envelope over. Sure enough, there was a red wax print on the envelope, and above the wax print, there was a shield-like shape. Coat of arms. The four horns of the shield are a lion, an eagle, a snake and a badger. Harry Potter. Artel breathed a sigh of relief, and suddenly understood. The kind of power he can't control seems to be the explosion of the little wizard's magic power. When his mood fluctuated violently, he inadvertently caused the magic power to explode. So this is the world of Harry Potter. Artel didn't know what it was like in his heart. He was a little nervous, a little excited, and a little disappointed. He had always thought that it was his unique gold finger, and he had also thought that after taking full control of that power, he would use the advantages of the Shelby family to become the godfather of the European region. Now, it turns out that I was thinking too much. He is just a little wizard, and even his talent may not be high. After all, he has tried for so long and has not found a clue to use magic power, and Voldemort was able to control his own magic power very well during the orphanage. Don't you have a gold finger after going through it yourself? In 1991, so I was in the same class as Harry Potter. Artel came back to his senses and glanced at the owl that was its neck at him on the table, thinking that the little guy might want some food. After all, it flew over from Hogwarts. Although I don't know where Hogwarts is, it should be not close to Birmingham. Artel took a bag of snacks from the drawer by the bed. It was a nice thick-cut smoked jerky. Owls are carnivores, but Artel didn't have rats or raw meat on hand, and didn't know if he would eat them. Used. Artel opened the snack bag, took 2 pieces of beef jerky from it, and handed it to the owl. The little guy tilted his head and looked at Artel, gurgling, then took the jerky and ate it. Seeing the owl eating on its own, Artel opened the parchment envelope. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster. Albus Dumbledore, President of the International Federation of Magic, recipient of the Order of Merlin, First Class, Chief Wizard of Wizengamore, Supreme Wizarding Court. Dear Mr. Shelby, we are pleased to inform you that you have been admitted to study at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and we enclose here with a list of required books and equipment. The semester is scheduled to start on September 1st and we will be waiting for your owl to hear back by July 31st. Vice-Chancellor. Minerva McGonagall. Artel gently placed the letter on the table. He had seen Harry Potter movies in his previous life, so he didn't think it was a prank or a trap set by some malicious people. After all, there is no Harry Potter book in this world, so it is impossible for anyone to make a Hogwarts mark and match the names of Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall. At this time, the owl had finished eating the beef jerky, but had not yet flown away. Artel thought about it, took out a piece of paper from the drawer, and wrote on it with a pen. Dear Professor McGonagall, thank you for your letter. Some unexplainable things happened to me, but I still have many questions. I hope I can ask you in person. I will prepare exquisite desserts and afternoon tea, and look forward to your visit. Artel Shelby. Artel rolled up the letter, put it in the parchment envelope, and handed it to the owl. The owl picked up the letter, flapped its wings and flew out. Artel closed the window again, turned off the light, and went back to the bed to lie down. For those little wizards from Muggle families, Hogwarts School will send professors to visit the door in person before the school starts. After all, they need to convince Muggles that the wizarding world exists, and they also need to take the little wizards to Diagon Alley, to buy what they need for admission. So even if Artel didn't reply, the Hogwarts professor would still come to the door, but it would be good to reply a letter, at least to make the never-masked Professor McGonagall's impression of him a little better. Although he comes from Shelby's bloody and violent family, grace and courtesy are also qualities a Shelby gentleman should possess. First impressions matter. Lying on the bed, Artel started thinking about something excitedly. He didn't know which college he would be assigned to. He is very aware of who he is, the blood of the Shelby family is flowing in his bones, and his ambitions are even bigger than Tommy Shelby. Because Artel always wanted to be the godfather of the entire European underground world, and then spread his family's power to the world. After all, the Shelby family's Razor Party used to be the most influential gang in the UK. Its connections and fame are here. Even if it is now in decline, as long as it has enough strength, it will be much easier to make a comeback than to start from scratch. Ambitious, cautious and considerate. Rational pursuit of interests, rather than impulsiveness, can chat and laugh with the enemy for the greater good. To be honest, he was more in line with Slytherin's requirements, but he wasn't pure blood, not even half-blood. He wondered if Slytherin would accept a student like himself. As for other colleges, Artel does not think that his quality meets the admission standards of these colleges. After thinking about it, it seems that Slytherin is more reliable. Dazed, Artel fell asleep. Tonight he had a rare dream, a dream of Harry Potter, a dream of Voldemort, a dream of the Wizarding World, and strangely, a dream of Hermione and Luna. Of course, this may be because he has always been very fond of these two girls in his last life. Dong dong dong. The door was knocked. The voice of his maid Sophia came from outside the door. Master Artel, it's almost time for breakfast. I see, come in. Artel replied, stretched, and sat up from the bed. Artel breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the admission letter beside his pillow was still there. He was really afraid that when he woke up, he would find that everything was just his imagination. Sophia is a blonde girl, not pretty, but very gentle. 18-year-old Sophia came to Shelby Manor when Artel was 3 years old. In a flash, 8 years have passed. Good morning, Master Artel. Sophia entered the room, put the clothes in her hand on the cabinet beside the bed, then walked over to open the curtains one by one, and opened a window in the corner. The sun shines into the house in the early morning of July, the window is green, and everything seems to be alive and full of vitality. Good morning, Sophia. Artel greeted her and went to the bathroom to wash up. Sophia prepared for him a fitted white shirt, a fitted gray vest and a matching suit, and the accessory was a delicate gold pocket watch. Because Artel doesn't need to go out today, Sophia didn't prepare a hat for him. Shelby family hats are always special, with sharp razors sewn into the brim, which is the pride of the family. When Artel changed clothes, Sophia kept watching. She had nothing to be shy about. She took care of Artel for 8 years. Sometimes Sophia even regarded Artel as her own child. After Artel was dressed, Sophia came to him, put the pocket watch in his suit pocket, and dangled one end of the watch chain on the button of the suit, then helped him adjust the collar of his shirt. Handsome boy, I don't know how many girls will be fascinated when I grow up. Sophia sincerely praised. Even though Artel is only 11 years old now, Sophia still feels a different charm in him. Handsome, elegant, calm and noble. It's hard to believe this is a kid who is only 11 years old. Artel inherited his mother's Roman blood, black hair and black pupils, which is a noble representative in today's British society. After all, the entire history of England originated in Rome. And most Romans have black hair and black pupils, including the famous Julius Caesar. Of course, in Artel's view, this is actually not much different from his previous life, except that the color of his pupils in the previous life was a little lighter, tending to be dark brown, and now it has become a color that is almost pure black. In general, Artel is still very satisfied. After all, the familiar black hair and black pupils make him feel that he is still an Oriental. The two left the room and walked towards the restaurant on the first floor. The Shelby family lived in Shelby Manor, besides Artel, his 2 uncles and an aunt. Of course, they also included a large family of their own. One of his 2 aunts was from a noble family in London, and the other was the daughter of an underground gang leader in Birmingham. In addition to the Shelby family, there are nearly 100 servants living in this incomparably huge manor, including housekeepers, cooks, gardeners, maids, etc. In addition, there are dozens of members of the Little Razor Party, who are responsible for the security of the manor. In addition to these, the Shelby family also kept dozens of hunting dogs, 100 horses on the horse farm, and a lot of cows and hens on the ranch of the manor. After all, the Shelby Manor is 100 acres in size, which is equivalent to 400,000 square meters in a well-understood unit. The Shelby family is used to eating together, which helps to cultivate feelings. The lessons of the predecessors are vividly remembered. There is a relationship between the decline of the Razor Party and the split of the Shelby family that cannot be ignored. Uncle Michael, Uncle Jimmy, Aunt Fiona, Aunt Nancy, Aunt Kate, Cousin Paul. Good morning. At the restaurant, Artel first said hello to the big family. Thomas. Good morning. Everyone replied in unison. Artel sat down at the table, and the maid in the restaurant began to serve them breakfast. The breakfast is almost the same every day. It is roughly bacon, fried eggs, fried mushrooms, fried sausages and other things. The main food is toast, and it will be accompanied by milk or black tea. After all, the UK is a food desert country, and Artel never expects anything to surprise him for breakfast. Thomas, after dinner, you're going to a 2-hour class with Paul and Jenny, and shooting practice in the afternoon, and then you can go swimming or play ball after practice. After Freddie went in, Michael took over the Shelby Manor, and he arranged everything for the little Shelbys every day. The Shelby kids wouldn't go to school because the other gangs in Birmingham might assassinate them as a way to beat the Shelbys, as Artel did. In fact, since that time, little Shelby has basically never left the estate except when necessary. I see. Artel nodded and ate the food from the plate gracefully. He didn't tell the crowd about Hogwarts, because the time had not come and there were too many people in the restaurant. The Shelby family has a wizard, and this matter will become the top secret of the entire family, and only a few people are qualified to know. After dinner, Artel went to class with his cousin Paul and cousin Jenny. He also has several cousins, but they are too young to go to class. Artel is an exception, because he is the future Shelby family leader, so even if he is only 11 years old, he will have to be with two 6-year-olds take classes together. Today's course is on philosophy and economics. It is said that the professor is from Oxford. Artel listens with great interest and asks a few questions from time to time, which amazes the professor. I can't believe you're only 11 years old, Artel. You have a great way of thinking about things, and I think you've got a great future ahead of you. After class, Artel said goodbye to his cousin and went to walk the dog with Sophia. Artel has a dog of his own, a Doberman Pinscher named Charlie. Looks like you can't take the dog to Hogwarts. Looking at Charlie, who was eating raw beef, Artel was lost in thought. Little wizards at Hogwarts can bring a pet when they enter the school. Generally speaking, it is nothing more than a cat, an owl or a toad. A mouse like Ron's is an alternative. In terms of dogs, apart from the three-headed dog in Artel's impression, there is only the tooth in Hagrid's hut. It seems that none of the students have dogs at school. Besides, Charlie is still a fierce Doberman Pinscher and has been trained as a hound. Hogwarts may not agree with him taking Charlie to school. Poor little fellow. Artel patted Charlie on the head, and the latter rubbed him affectionately, continuing to gulp down the steak. After walking the dog, Artel went back to the castle to watch TV for a while. When it was time, he went to lunch. After lunch, he rested for a while. Artel was going to have today's shooting training. In general, afternoon training is carried out every other day. In addition to shooting, there are equestrian and combat training. Artel was using a PPK pistol with less recoil, but he was still sore wrists after training. The moving target hits all the time. The fixed target hits the bullseye time after time. Artel, the Shelbys will be proud of you. In charge of teaching Artel to shoot is his father Freddie's good brother Jerome, who is also a sharpshooter and has saved Freddie's life several times. Artel respects him very much. Thank you for your compliment, Uncle Jerome. If it weren't for your teaching, I don't think I would have achieved such a result. Ha ha ha. Jerome laughed happily, took 2 gulps from his glass, and told Artel some stories about how he fought Birmingham with Freddie, and the afternoon training was over. Artel went straight to his own swimming pool behind the castle, soaked in the pool and ate some cakes, and after afternoon tea, Artel swam a few laps before returning to the castle. That's it for today's campaign. Artel turns on the TV. For half a month, Artel was looking forward to the reply from the owl every day, and finally that night, Artel's window was knocked again. It was the owl that brought Professor McGonagall's reply. Professor McGonagall said in her letter that she would visit at 3 p.m. on July 30th. Reading between the lines, she seemed to have a good impression of Artel. Artel glanced at the calendar. The 30th was still a week away. In a week, I will be in touch with the wizarding world. Artel couldn't help but be fascinated when he thought of the mysterious magic, the incredible power. In order to welcome Professor McGonagall, Artel went to Michael specifically and told him that a very distinguished guest would come to the door on the afternoon of the 30th, and asked him to inform the servants to prepare the desserts and drinks needed for afternoon tea in advance. In addition, Artel also asked him to notify the Razorback gunmen who were guarding Shelby Manor in advance. After all, he didn't want Professor McGonagall to walk into the manor and find that there were gang members with guns everywhere. Finally, under Artel's thoughts, the time came to July 30th. 2:50 in the afternoon. Artel brought Sophia, accompanied by Shelby and many servants, to the gate of the manor. At 2:58, a beautiful silver tabby cat gracefully appeared on the road outside Shelby Manor. Artel's eyes lit up. He knew that Professor McGonagall was a Gus. No accident, this tabby cat should be Professor McGonagall. But what surprised him was that the tabby cat didn't come over, but stopped abruptly, and then suddenly got into the woods beside him. In fact, Professor McGonagall did not expect so many people at the gate of Shelby Manor. As a wizard, she couldn't show magic in front of muggles, except, of course, at Hogwarts admissions, because she needed to perform some magic to convince the young wizard's muggle parents. But there are indeed too many people coming, not only Artel and his guardian, but also some unrelated people. Professor McGonagall has no choice but to get into the woods. The time is almost up. Michael took out his pocket watch and glanced at it. It was 2:59. I'm sure she'll be there on time. Artel opened his mouth to speak, and his voice only fell. A woman in an emerald green robe came out of the woods abruptly, startling everyone waiting at the gate of the manor. She is a serious-looking woman with a pair of glasses. She is tall and a little thin. She looks like she is in her 60s or 70s. She has some heavy crow's feet, but she is in a good state of mind. Her black hair is tied up high. With a little mystery, was looking at Artel at this time. Because Artel looked surprised when he saw her, and then it even turned into surprise. Of course, Professor McGonagall didn't know, because when he saw Professor McGonagall himself, a sudden voice suddenly appeared in Artel's mind. Ding! It is detected that the host has successfully contacted important plot characters in the Harry Potter world, and the system is turned on. Please host as soon as possible to choose the artifact that needs to be created. Artifact? What artifact? Artel, who was caught in surprise, didn't have time to think. He only knew that he had a gold finger, and this gold finger could only be triggered after touching the main characters of Harry Potter. Because this is the world of Harry Potter. Mr. Artel Shelby. Professor McGonagall looked at Shelby and asked curiously. You look like a bit of a surprise. Yes, Professor McGonagall. Artel came to his senses and gave Professor McGonagall a gentleman's salute. You should understand that in the legends, the images of witches are relatively evil, and they are often accompanied by death and curses. To be honest, before this, I always thought you. Artel said, smiling embarrassedly. I really saw you and found that you are completely different from what I imagined. Although it looks serious, I can feel your kindness, which is enough to surprise me. After listening to Artel's words, Professor McGonagall's face showed a look of astonishment. She looked at Artel, then smiled. Thank you, Artel. The conversation between the two made the people on the side puzzled, and Michael's eyes had a hint of vigilance. He just seemed to hear Artel talking about a witch. Could this so-called guest be a witch? Poor Artel must have been deceived by this woman. Michael looked bad. He was about to speak when he heard Artel invite the woman to the manor's castle. After thinking about it, he still didn't speak, just winked at his brother Jimmy. Jimmy nodded without looking, and the group got into the car bound for the castle in a strange atmosphere. Yes, because Shelby Manor is a bit large, it is generally a scooter from the gate to the castle. Professor McGonagall naturally rides with Artel in a car, with Michael driving and Jimmy in the co-pilot. Professor McGonagall, do you know which university did you study in? Jimmy glanced at McGonagall through the rearview mirror and asked. Professor McGonagall didn't answer, but looked at Artel. They're my uncles, this is Jimmy, this is Michael, my mother died, my father was locked up for some reason, and they're my guardians now. Artel shrugged. He didn't deceive McGonagall. In the eyes of wizards, Muggle affairs are just trivial problems. Hogwarts dares to accept the children of Death Eaters, let alone a gang member in the Muggle world. Oh, poor boy. McGonagall reached out and touched Artel's head, then looked at Jimmy and replied. I'm the vice principal of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and a professor of Transfiguration. Ah, Jimmy's expression became dull for a moment, he frowned and turned around. I'm sorry, I didn't catch it, what you said. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Mr. Jimmy, I'm the vice principal and professor of Transfiguration. Professor McGonagall obviously knew that it was impossible to convince a Muggle with just a few words, so she stopped talking nonsense and became her own Gus. Watching a big living person turn into a cute tabby cat, the shock in Jimmy and Michael's hearts can be imagined. Oh, shit, Jimmy exclaimed, and Michael slammed on the brakes. Artel, this, obviously, what Professor McGonagall said is true. She is a witch, and I received an admission letter from Hogwarts some time ago. I am a little wizard. Artel explained to his two uncles. Aren't you always curious, how did I survive that assassination? That's why. After all, Michael and Jimmy are the core members of the Shelby family. After the initial shock, they gradually recovered. Michael continued to drive, but his eyes fell on Professor McGonagall through the rearview mirror from time to time. Professor McGonagall changed back to her human appearance and said to the two. The purpose of my coming here today is to make you believe in the existence of wizards. Artel needs to go to Hogwarts to learn how to become a wizard. He has magic power in his body, and if it is not controlled, he will die in the future. Michael and Jimmy naturally didn't want Artel to die, not to mention Artel is now a wizard. This is the Shelby family's first ever wizard. Their family has a wizard. Michael and Jimmy glanced at each other and laughed excitedly. If Artel were a wizard. The two men chatted excitedly. Professor McGonagall's face gradually became serious, because the words of the two men in front of her became more and more outrageous. What brought down Birmingham, captured London, took control of England, radiated Europe, etc. I'm sorry, gentlemen. Mag interrupted the discussion between Michael and Jimmy and said seriously. The wizarding world has strict rules. Any wizard who tries to break the rules and do evil will have no good end. Professor McGonagall meant both to warn Michael and Jimmy, and to beat Artel. Even if she didn't know much about Muggles, Artel seemed to come from a less than friendly family by now. The existence of this family in the Muggle world is likely to be similar to the Dark Wizard family or the Death Eater family in the Wizarding world. She wants to teach Artel as well as possible before he grows up. Oh, of course, of course. Michael smirked and glared at Jimmy. Uncle Michael, I became a little wizard, and the fact that I am going to Hogwarts school will be a family secret from now on, and no one else can know about it except you, Uncle Jimmy, and my father. Quote. Artel exhorted, and Professor McGonagall looked at him with satisfaction and nodded lightly. Only the guardians of Artel have the right to know some things about the wizarding world, so I hope that the two gentlemen will not spread it out. If others find out, they will be cursed. In order to frighten these two guys, Professor McGonagall told a small lie. Michael and Jimmy shuddered, and when they heard the word curse, they realized how evil and terrifying the legendary witch was, so they hurriedly responded. Finally, the car stopped on the lawn in front of the central castle. Everyone got out of the car. Michael respectfully led the way to Professor McGonagall, while Jimmy stopped the others behind. The four entered the reception room and took their seats. The maid brought desserts and drinks, and then left respectfully, closing the door gently. Professor McGonagall, I don't know what you like to eat, so I only prepared some desserts and black tea. Oh, Jimmy, I remember that you have a bottle of brandy that is 100 years old. No, Mr. Michael. Mag interrupted Michael's words and said with a smile. Black tea is good. All right. Michael nodded, took a sip from the teacup, and asked. I don't know how much your school's tuition is. When will the school start? What do we need to prepare? That's exactly what I'm here for. Professor McGonagall looked at Artel beside him and said. Hogwarts will start on September 1st, and the little wizards need to take their tickets to platform 9 3/4 of King's Cross Station and take the Hogwarts Express to the school. Professor McGonagall took out a ticket and gave it to Artel. There's magic being cast there. Only people with magic powers can pass this platform, and they won't be noticed by muggles. Well, muggles are people who don't know magic. Professor McGonagall glanced at Michael and Jimmy, and continued. As for tuition, don't worry. Hogwarts is free and does not require additional tuition, but the little wizard needs to prepare the required textbooks, books and various props. These things can be bought in Diagon Alley. The currency of the wizarding world is gold galleons, and silver west and copper nat, but as a muggle little wizard at Hogwarts, you can use British pounds every year at Gringotts Bank. £500 in exchange for 100 galleons. Professor McGonagall's words shocked Michael and Jimmy. How cheap is it to train a little wizard? To be honest, Michael even planned to pay tens of thousands of pounds or even hundreds of gold bars, but in the end he only needed £500. The entrance to Diagon Alley is in Charing Cross Street, London, where there is a leaky cauldron pub, which is also enchanted and cannot be seen by muggles, but a little wizard without a wand cannot go through there alone to Diagon Alley, and needs to be guided by a wizard. Just lead. Professor McGonagall paused and looked at Artel. Tomorrow I'll take you and another little wizard to Diagon Alley to buy what you need. Like you, she comes from a muggle family. Maybe you can take care of each other at school in the future. Artel didn't know who McGonagall was talking about, and the original book didn't seem to mention it, but he didn't care, but asked. Okay, Professor McGonagall, don't know the exact time. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock, at Charing Cross Street. Professor McGonagall calculated the time. It also takes time to travel from Birmingham to London. After that, they have to make purchases and then go home, so the best time is noon. Okay, I'll be there on time. After getting Artel's reply, Professor McGonagall nodded. She took a sip of black tea, and said with a smile. Nice afternoon tea, as long as you like it. There was a pleasing smile on Michael's face. He also wanted to ask his son if he had a chance to go to school, but Professor McGonagall obviously didn't give him a chance, just disappeared. Michael froze for a moment, then gave a wry smile. Jimmy, tomorrow you're driving Artel to London. I'm going to see Big Brother tonight. Hey, there's a wizard from the Shelby family, and Birmingham can't stop us. The Shelby family will eventually take charge of the glory and rise to the top. Watching the two uncles in the middle school fall into fantasy, Artel shook his head, then got up to say goodbye to the two and returned to his room. He wants to study his gold finger well. If he heard correctly, he seemed to have heard the word artifact just now. System. Artel lay on the bed, trying to call his system mentally. Then, a light curtain that only he could see appeared in front of him. The light curtain is divided into 3 pieces. On the first light curtain, a bright silver long sword was displayed, which was inserted into a square stone, exuding a majestic aura. On it was written a sentence, "Only the king can wield this sword." Pulled out of the rock. The tone of the second light curtain was much darker, like an abyss. In the center was a cluster of bright red flames. Among the flames, a dark golden ring fluctuated in the flames, exuding an evil and terrifying aura. The third light curtain is sea blue, and it seems that in the endless sea, a blue trident is exuding a dazzling light. The moment he saw these 3 light curtains, Artel knew the origin of these 3 things from the system. The sword in the stone, the Lord of the Rings, the trident of the sea god. From the movies Sword in the Stone, the Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean. And now, Artel needs to choose one of the 3 of them. These 3 artifacts all symbolize power. The sword in the stone belongs to King Arthur, the Lord of the Rings belongs to Sauron, and the trident belongs to Poseidon, but they are not from mythology but from the movie world. Considering that this world is the world of Harry Potter, it is self-evident which one to choose. I choose the Supreme Lord of the Rings. Artel made a choice, and then, the light curtain in the middle shook violently, and a dark breath was released, and Artel seemed to hear an extremely angry shout. Do not. The voice seemed to be filled with unparalleled hatred, but then a warm current flowed into Artel's body, making him completely ignore the influence of that breath. The light curtain disappeared, and a simple ring appeared in front of Artel, then slowly faded and disappeared. However, Artel could feel that the ring seemed to be hidden in his body, and could be summoned at any time according to his will. Artifact. The Lord of the Rings Seal. Soulbound. Introduction. The Supreme Lord of the Rings, which has poured the efforts and most of the power of the demon Lord Sauron, has unparalleled power. Note: Sauron's evil thoughts have been eliminated, and the Supreme Lord of the Rings has been bound to the host's soul. Unblocking progress. 5%. Unlock abilities. 1. Escape into the underworld. Wearing the Lord of the Rings can enter the underworld dimension and become invisible in the main world. 2. Necromancer. The bearer will have Sauron's super magic talent, especially in dark magic and necromantic magic. He has an unimaginable comprehension power. Unlocked. 3. Dominate all beings. Greatly improve the leader's ability of the bearer, and have a natural ability to dominate others, which can easily convince others and take refuge. Ringwrath. Unlocked. 4. Immortal person. The bearer is affected by the power of the Lord of the Rings, the lifespan is greatly increased, and the soul is immortal. After the body dies, the body can be recast by other means. Unlocked. 5. Dark Supreme. The magic power of the bearer will be greatly enhanced, and he can master and use all dark magics proficiently, and can control any other creatures with dark attributes. Unlocked. Artel closed the introduction panel of the Lord of the Rings and asked the system. So the Supreme Lord of the Rings is still under seal, and only one invisible ability has been unlocked. Then how can I unseal the Supreme Lord of the Rings? The system's voice echoed in Artel's mind. The host has selected the Supreme Lord of the Rings and has already opened the summoning qualification for the world of the Lord of the Rings. The host can summon characters and items for free once a month. Summoning characters and items related to the Lord of the Rings will greatly improve the unlocking progress. At the same time, the host can obtain world plot points by completing the corresponding tasks. Through the plot points, you can purchase related characters or items from the system to speed up the unlocking progress. After listening to the introduction of the system, Artel was relieved a lot, and it seemed quite safe. Afterwards, Artel took a look at his quest, and a main quest has been activated. Main quest. The Path of the Supreme. Current mission objective. Join Slytherin House. Introduction of the current task. Slytherin is a breeding ground for the Dark Lord, and its name is really not worthy of people's impression of it. Then, let Slytherin be the greatest demon lord of all time. Mission reward. 100 plot points. Seeing the mission goal, Artel breathed a sigh of relief. The task is not difficult, it can even be said to be simple. In terms of his character, he is basically a must to enter Slytherin. Even if there is any accident, Artel can use the Lord of the Rings to induce the Sorting Hat. If this is the case in the future, this level of task, then the accumulation of plot points is still very simple. The Lord of the Rings is a symbol of power, strength and Sauron's ambition. When Artel chose it, he was actually ready. Therefore, the main line of the road to the Supreme is actually a reflection of Artel's heart. Artel is very satisfied with this. It is perfect that he can achieve his goals and have additional rewards to help him. It is not difficult to obtain plot points, so the exchange price of the mall. Artel opened the system's mall, and rows of exchange lists appeared in front of him. Character. Gandalf. Exchange price. 10,000 story points. Need to have Naya the Ring of Fire. Fencer Glamdrin. World acceptance. Note: the unlocking progress of the Supreme Lord of the Rings can be increased by 20%. Character. Saruman. Exchange price. 10,000 plot points. Requires a crystal ball of true knowledge, a strong orc army of 5,000 people, and world acceptance. Note: the unlocking progress of the Supreme Lord of the Rings can be increased by 20%. Character. Sauron. Redemption price. 50,000 plot points. Need to possess the 9 rings, 7 rings of dwarves, 3 rings of elf, Eye of Sauron, world acceptance. Note: Sauron can increase the unlocking progress of the Supreme Lord of the Rings by 25%. If Sauron cannot be summoned, the Supreme Lord of the Rings can only be unlocked by a maximum of 99%. Note 2. Characters who need world acceptance cannot be summoned when their acceptance is not full. Looking at the rows of characters and items, Artel let out a weak sigh. The items are okay, as long as they have plot points, they can be exchanged, but the characters are not enough. Most characters need to have bond items to be summoned. In addition to the exchange price required for the bond items, there are still quite a lot of plot points required. Among them, Sauron is the most pitiful and must be summoned. The most powerful dark supreme ability of the Lord of the Rings must be unlocked by 100%, but if Sauron is summoned, it means that Artel must fight Sauron. Because Sauron definitely wanted to take the Supreme Lord of the Rings back. There is also the so-called world acceptance. Artel also learned about it from the system. Characters who need world acceptance cannot be summoned casually. They can only be summoned after the acceptance is full. And if you want to increase acceptance, you need him to build momentum. In short, Artel had to let the wizarding world know who Gandalf, Saruman, and Sauron were, and believed that there was such a person before he could summon him. Otherwise, it cannot be summoned. Of course, it doesn't need everyone to believe it, just that most wizards have heard their names and believe they exist. Take your time, it's not in a hurry anyway. Although there are not many plot point rewards, Artel is very patient. He is only 11 years old. And there are still a few years before Voldemort's resurrection. Before that, Hogwarts was relatively safe, of course, provided he didn't take the initiative to ask for trouble. Besides, I still have 2 free summon opportunities every month. Even if I only unlock 1% or 2% each time, I will save a lot. Artel was inexplicably excited. System, I want to extract the Lord of the Rings items. Artel decided to take an item to test the water first. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully extracting the item, Saruman's experiment notes. A black parchment scroll suddenly appeared in Artel's hand, looking very old and heavy. This diary is not a bond item of the Lord of the Rings, nor is it Saruman's bond item. Artel was a little disappointed, but when he opened the diary and looked at it, a look of surprise appeared on his face. This is Saruman's experimental notes for cultivating strong orcs. It records every step of Saruman's production of strong orcs in detail, as well as what he needs. And Saruman's exchange conditions included having a strong orc army. In addition, the above also records the refining methods of some potions and the incantations of some ancient incantations, as well as casting gestures and related spiritual magic requirements. According to the prompt of the system, the materials needed to make strong orcs and potions are not from this world, but the system has been very considerately modified to the materials owned by this world, and the effect remains the same. The same goes for the ancient spells recorded in the notebooks. After all, Saruman's true identity is a demigod. Most of his mana is reflected in his spiritual power, and he doesn't need any spells to cast spells. The spells on the notebook are also changes made by the system according to Harry's world. Of course, none of this matters. The important thing is that, through this experiment note, Artel can learn the ancient magic spells that this world does not have, and can also create strong orcs and the powerful potions recorded above. And if these things are used well, it will be very helpful for me to complete the task in the future, and it will also be very helpful to improve Saruman's acceptance in the world. Artel had a vague idea in his heart. He took a closer look. There were many things he had never heard of before, but there were also some things he was familiar with. These include centaur's blood and troll hearts. There are centaurs in the Forbidden Forest at Hogwarts. If there is a troll, Professor Quirrell will get one on Halloween, so you need to plan carefully. Artel put the notebook into the system space. Although this notebook is not a fettered item, it is very practical. It seems that today's luck is not bad, so he decided to strike while the iron is hot. System, summon the Lord of the Rings characters. Ding! Congratulations to the host, you successfully summoned Smeagol. The unlock rate of the Supreme Lord of the Rings has increased by 15%. Congratulations to the host, the unlocking degree of the Supreme Lord of the Rings has reached 20%, and the ability has been successfully unlocked, Necromancer. Artel was startled, then a look of ecstasy appeared on his face. Immediately afterwards, an inexplicable force emerged from his soul, powerful but evil, and Artel understood that it was the ability of the Necromancer of the Lord of the Rings to be unlocked. Smeagol. Artel checked through the system and found that this Smeagol was the Hobbit Gollum. He has held the Supreme Lord of the Rings for nearly 500 years, no wonder he can suddenly increase the unlocking degree by 15%. In addition to those main characters, I am afraid that Gollum can add so much. After all, according to the relationship with the Supreme Lord of the Rings, the bond between him and the Supreme Lord of the Rings is even deeper than some members of the Fellowship of the Ring. Good luck. There was a smile on Artel's face. On the first day of the awakening system, the unlocking progress of the Supreme Lord of the Rings was increased to 20%. What happens if my Supreme Lord of the Rings unlock rate reaches 100%? Artel suddenly thought of this question. The system will provide 3 higher-level artifacts for the host to choose from. The system didn't hide it, and replied directly. Artel nodded thoughtfully, but he didn't expect too much. Today, he was lucky, but he can't be so lucky all the time. Who knows how long it will take to completely unlock the Supreme Lord of the Rings. Where's that Gollum? Where did he go? Artel looked around. Gollum didn't appear directly like a notebook. Artel didn't know where the system put him. If he were thrown into the Muggle world, Artel could imagine the consequences. A strange-looking humanoid creature, not in a normal state of mind, and often muttering in a gloomy tone, "My precious. My baby." Just thinking about it makes your scalp tingle. Smeagol has not yet extracted. The host can choose any place to put it, only in the wizarding world. Please note that the storage period of Smeagol is 1 month. After the character call is updated, Smeagol will be automatically placed in the surrounding area of the host. The system's answer sounded. Artel breathed a sigh of relief, and after thinking about it, Gulu didn't seem to be of any use to him in the future. Moreover, the hobbits have no magical ability, and Gollum is a lunatic. Drop Gollum into Azkaban. Artel spoke out about his choice. Ding! Smeagol has been successfully put into Azkaban. Hearing the system prompt, Artel expressed his satisfaction. But then he thought, as if tomorrow is Harry Potter's birthday, if he throws Gollum in front of Harry Potter at midnight tonight, I don't know what will happen. Harry Potter closed his eyes and made a wish. When he opened his eyes, he found Gollum's big eyes staring at him, and then said to him, "My darling, it's fun to think about. Unfortunately, Harry Potter is not in the wizarding world now." Artel shook his head and smiled. Without thinking much, he took out the notebook he just put in the space. Originally, he couldn't understand the ancient spells recorded on it, but after unlocking the ability of the Lord of the Rings necromancer, Artel suddenly could understand. Artel studied Saruman's notes in the room, far away from the North Sea. An isolated island stands on the icy sea, and a dark castle stands on the cliff of the isolated island. This is the famous Azkaban in the wizarding world. Outside the castle, countless dementors hovered and danced. In a room on the 3rd floor, a humanoid creature similar to a house elf suddenly appeared here. His 2 eyes were like light bulbs, showing a yellow-green color, matching the head with only a few hairs, and the ugly his face looked very strange. Where is this? Gulu hunched over, carefully looking at this unfamiliar environment. This is a conspiracy. Another sound came out of Gulu's mouth, which sounded sullen. This is Baggins' conspiracy. He's a thief. A vile, shameless thief. He stole our treasure. My treasure. Yes, baby, my darling. Gulu's eyes turned green, exuding a faint light. He turned around a few times in place, and sighed fiercely. It must be Baggins. He found the elf and cast a magic spell and locked us here. Gulu was swearing fiercely when a woman's figure suddenly appeared in his field of vision from the darkness in the corner. The woman's hair was messy and looked dirty. At this moment, she was looking straight at him, her eyes showing disgust. Kind eyes. It's amazing, ha 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 ha. The woman stared at Gollum and spoke slowly. Her voice seemed to be the rubbing sound of a corpse that had just crawled out of the grave, and even the dark grunt made her scalp tingle. A house elf. No. The woman came over, stared at Gulu fiercely, and shouted. What the hell are you? A goblin, or a human with some kind of curse? Who is Baggins? What treasure did he steal? How did you get here? Gulu stepped back cautiously, until there was the icy stone wall of the castle behind him, and there was no way to retreat. He squatted down quickly, picked up a sharp gravel, and looked at the woman in front of him viciously. Mine. That's my baby. Your baby. Ha 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 ha. The woman laughed wildly, took out an old wand from somewhere, suddenly pointed her finger at Gulu, grinned, and her smile became more and more gloomy. Drill the heart and gouge out the bone. Gollum's pained howls echoed through Azkaban along with Bellatrix's wild laughter, and the man behind it all was trying his magic in the warm room of Shelby Manor Castle. Created by low-level undead. Skull Warrior summons. As Artel waved his hand lightly, a faint light flashed, and then, a skeleton warrior about 2 meters tall appeared in front of Artel. His bones are very thick, and his two pale hand bones are still holding weapons, a rusted iron sword and a log shield. It can be seen that he should have been a powerful warrior in his lifetime. The skeleton warrior's two eye sockets shone with dark green ghosts, and it stood in front of Artel, motionless. Not bad. Artel nodded with satisfaction. The skeleton warrior looked quite strong, at least not the tattered skeleton soldier with osteoporosis. Artel controlled the skeleton warrior for a while. The speed and strength are far beyond ordinary people. A skeleton warrior must have no problem dealing with 4 or 5 muggles at the same time, and although the weapon looks rusty, it is actually quite sharp. With a tetanus bonus, the combat power should not be underestimated. After testing it, Artel dispelled the magic, and the skeleton warrior disappeared again with a bang. There are many ancient spells recorded in Saruman's notebooks, including a part of necromancy. And the ability of the necromancer did not disappoint Artel. He just studied it briefly, and he completely mastered the creation of the low-level undead just now, and he can even cast spells without a staff. The more magic wizards, the more skeleton warriors will be summoned. If the magic power is sufficient, it is very simple to summon thousands of them at once. In addition to summoning skeletons, there are also zombies, licks, death knights, bone dragons. Well, it seems quite simple, but my magic power is not enough. Artel's mastery of necromancy was beyond his imagination, and after simply looking at it for a while, he felt that he had mastered these magics, but his magic power was not enough, so he couldn't test it yet. In addition to undead magic, Saruman's notes also contain some spells about holy light magic, natural magic and elemental magic. Artel briefly looked at some of them. Although he could not master it as quickly as necromantic magic, he had a feeling, as long as you study it in depth, you can still quickly grasp it. As expected of the Supreme Lord of the Rings. No, it should be said that it is worthy of the Demon Lord Sauron. After all, the necromancer is Sauron's talent. Artel glanced at the time, put away the notes, sighed, and went downstairs to eat. Waking up the next day, Artel took the clothes for the day from Sophia. White shirt, brown vest, brown suit, embellished gold pocket watch and a newsboy cap with razor blades, and a pair of shiny leather shoes. After breakfast, Artel got into Jimmy's car. They were planning to drive to London, and it would take just over 2 hours to reach their destination. In addition to their car, several gunmen will follow. After all, Artel is the only little wizard in the Shelby family, and Michael wants to ensure his safety. Originally, Michael wanted to arrange dozens of people to follow them, but Artel refused. To reassure Michael and Jimmy, Artel deliberately summoned a skeleton monster in front of them. Then let it chop down a big tree in the manner with one sword. The terrifying power of the skeletons shocked the two of them. In the end, they could only follow Artel's advice and removed most of the gunmen, leaving only a few elites, on the grounds that Jimmy also needed to be protected. The journey was safe and sound, with no attacks or assassinations. It was 10:30 in the morning when Artel was standing in the streets of Charing Cross. You don't need to be so nervous when you get to London. Jimmy has a lover in London. After talking to Artel, he left with a few younger brothers. And Artel wandered the street, and soon noticed the leaky cauldron, which was out of tune with the surrounding area. However, Artel did not go in, but found a bookstore on the corner of the street. It was not until the time was up that Artel came to the street. It didn't take long before he saw the figure of Professor McGonagall. Behind her, followed by a couple and a little wizard, Artel showed a slightly surprised look. Because that little wizard is Hermione. Professor McGonagall also saw Artel and waved at him. Artel walked over calmly. I told Mr. Granger just now that you must be waiting for us here. Professor McGonagall said to him with a smile. I've only just arrived, so glad to see you again, Professor McGonagall. This is Mr. Granger, this is his wife, this is Miss Granger, just like you, the little wizard who entered the school this year. Professor McGonagall introduced Artel, and Artel nodded to the three. Hello, nice to meet you, Mr. Granger, Mrs. Granger and, of course, lovely Miss Granger. My name is Artel, Artel Shelby. Mr. Shelby, nice to meet you. Mr. Granger responded with a smile, and Mrs. Granger, who was next to him, nodded and said, Professor McGonagall told us about you just now. She said you were an elegant little gentleman, and that's true. Hermione was also looking at this little wizard who was the same age as her. With a hint of pride and curiosity in her eyes, she took the initiative to say, "Hi, my name is Hermione." Hearing this, Artel looked at Hermione. She had brown hair, three-dimensional and delicate facial features, and looked very cute. She was the beautiful Hermione in Artel's impression. Not bad. For Hermione, Artel was born with a hint of affection, but that was all, so he just greeted Hermione politely. "Hello, Miss Hermione, nice to meet you. Okay, let's get down to business. Today's task is still very heavy." Seeing Artel and they all knew each other, Professor McGonagall spoke softly and brought a few people to the door of the leaky cauldron. Because of Professor McGonagall's magic, even if the Grangers were muggles, they could watch go to the leaky cauldron. "I swear, I've never seen this bar before when I've passed by." Mr. Granger was obviously surprised, and his knowledge of magic was a little more profound. "Let's go in." Professor McGonagall took the 4 people into the bar. There were many wizards in the bar. They smiled and greeted Professor McGonagall. After dealing with everyone, Professor McGonagall took them to the patio behind the bar. "Remember this location, and when you have your own wands, you can come to Diagon Alley alone." Professor McGonagall spoke to Artel and Hermione, then took out his wand and tapped 3 times on the bricks that were on the trash can. "Wow!" At Hermione's exclamation, the brick wall transformed into an archway, revealing Diagon Alley behind. "This is Diagon Alley. Now, let's go to Gringotts, which is the Goblins' Bank." The British pound in the Muggle world has only a very low value for wizards, so the goblin responsible for exchanging golden galleons did not give Artel and others a good look. After spending £500 for 100 gold galleons, Professor McGonagall left Gringotts with everyone. Although the Grangers were adults, they also acted like children at this time, full of amazement and curiosity about everything in Diagon Alley. "Let's go shopping for wands first, and I don't think you want to be walking around with cauldrons and brass scales with a pile of books." Professor McGonagall led the group to the door of a small and dilapidated shop. The sign on the door was too broken, but it could still be seen clearly. "Ollivander has been making fine wands since 382 BC. Professional rod making 2000. Artel murmured in his heart, and followed behind Professor McGonagall into the famous wand shop. There was no one in the store, and the space was a bit small. There was a bench in the corner. Professor McGonagall motioned the Grangers to wait on the bench. Not long after, an old man with silver hair came out from behind the counter. "Oh, long time no see, Minerva, fur, 9½ inches, especially good for transfiguration. Now think about it, time flies. I remember when I was next to my father, he sold you that wand." Ollivander looked at McGonagall with a hint of reminiscence in her eyes, then came back to her senses and looked at Artel and Hermione behind Professor McGonagall. "The little wizards going to school this year. Let's see which wand will choose them." Ollivander came out from behind the counter, looked at the 2, and asked, "What little wizard wants to have his own wand?" "Lady first." Artel took a step back and motioned for Hermione to come first. "Great lad." Ollivander smiled, looked at Hermione, and asked, "So, boy, which hand do you use?" "Right hand." Although this Ollivander looked a little weird, Hermione was not afraid and stretched out her right hand. "Oh well." Ollivander nodded, snapped his fingers, and a tape measure flew out of the corner and automatically measured Hermione's body, not even missing the position between the 2 nostrils. In midair, there is also a quill and a notebook, recording data in Swish. Ollivander, on the other hand, went back to the back of the cupboard and began to search from the piles of wand boxes. Artel looked at Professor McGonagall and asked softly, "Why do you need to measure these when you buy a wand?" "It is said that each wand must be a perfect fit for the little wizard." Professor McGonagall obviously has no confidence, and can't say clearly. But the little wizard's body grows every year, and it doesn't even take a year. Maybe these data will be inaccurate after 3 months, and these wands are not made now, they have been made before, and now there is some discretion. Late. Very clever boy. Ollivander came out from behind the counter at some point, a wand box in his hand. But this sense of ritual is our respect for wands. Ollivander came to Hermione, opened the box in his hand, and took out a wand. Grapevine wood, dragon nerve, 9¾ inches. Try this, boy. Hermione took the wand and looked at Ollivander. Wait a little, like this. Hermione imitated Ollivander's movement and waved, and a genial wind was born out of nowhere, surrounding Hermione, and at the same time, a dazzling light burst out from the tip of the wand. A great combination. This wand has chosen you, Vinewood, as suitable for wizards with lofty pursuits and extraordinary foresight. I hope you will make good use of it. After Ollivander finished speaking, he looked at Artel. Hermione recovered from that wonderful feeling, fondling the wand in her hand, a happy smile on her face. Then, let's measure it first. The tape measure flew again and measured it on Artel's body. The quill pen recorded it in the small notebook. Artel was a little curious. Did it record the measurements of many wizards from ancient times to the present? After a while, Ollivander came out again and handed Artel a wand. Holly, unicorn tail hair, 11 inches, oh, put it down. Put it down. Ollivander was still introducing the wand calmly, but when Artel grabbed the wand crackled. Although Artel had let go at the first time, it was clear that the wand was still damaged. The holly stick was cracked, and the unicorn tail hair inside was burned out. The terrifying talent, the evil magic, the tail hair of a unicorn can't even bear. Ollivander took a deep look at Artel and went back to the back of the cabinet to rummage. Professor McGonagall frowned deeply, but said nothing. It seems that Artel has an extraordinary talent in black magic, but he is a child after all. As long as he receives a good education at Hogwarts, there should be no problems in the future. Artel turned around and found that Professor McGonagall and Hermione were looking at him, so he could only helplessly shrug his shoulders. It must be a ghost from the Lord of the Rings. The soul binding of the Lord of the Rings and Artel gave him an unimaginable dark power, and he also unlocked the ability of a necromancer, especially good at black magic and necromancy. Not surprisingly. After a while, Ollivander reappeared. Yew-wood, a material that symbolizes death, is very suitable for black magic. The heart of the staff is the hair of the wetland werewolf. It also has an unparalleled affinity for black magic. 12 3/4 inches. Ollivander confidently put the wand in Artel's hand. Artel waved it, and everyone seemed to hear a wailing. Oh, it looks like it doesn't fit either. Ollivander took his wand back and looked at it carefully. The body of the yew-wood stick has not changed, the core of the stick is damaged, and the wetland werewolf can't do it. Let me think about it, let me think about it. Ollivander muttered and left again. He felt a little distressed. The wetland werewolf's hair was not his usual material, and there were only a few wetland werewolf wands in his store. Sorry, I didn't expect it to be so troublesome. Artel said apologetically to Professor McGonagall. It's okay, Artel, your powers are unique. A wand is a wizard's best friend. We need to be patient. Of course, you need to understand that it doesn't matter what our powers are, but the choices we make. Professor McGonagall said to Artel with a smile. Artel nodded, knowing that the performance just now made Professor McGonagall a little worried about him. A student born in a gang family and born to practice black magic. If he joins Slytherin again, I am afraid that Professor McGonagall will worry that he will become bad in his dreams. This one, it must be this one, I have a wonderful premonition. Just thinking about it, Ollivander appeared again. He was holding a quaint box in his hand that looked old. Chapter 11. This wand isn't mine, it's from my grandfather, a great attempt. Ollivander smiled mysteriously, and took out a simple wand from inside, which also looked yew-wood, but there were some complex patterns on it, which were very mysterious. This is a special yew tree. It absorbs the blood and toxins of the leopard. The normal core can't even get close to it, so my grandfather made a bold attempt. Ollivander stroked his wand and said slowly, Yew-wood, Dementor's nerves. Before Ollivander could finish speaking, Professor McGonagall interrupted him. What, Ollivander, I don't agree with you giving such a dangerous wand to a little wizard. Oh, take it easy, Minerva, it's not the wizard who chooses the wand, it's the wand that chooses the wizard. This wand has been silent for hundreds of years, and it's been waiting for today, I think. Ollivander handed the wand over. Artel looked a little surprised at the wand in front of him. A wand made of Dementor nerves. Ollivander's grandfather is really crazy. By the way, does that thing have nerves? How did you get it off? Artel reached out and took the wand. A mysterious feeling of throbbing spread throughout the body, and strands of white mist formed out of thin air. with a terrifying chill, sweeping the entire Ollivander wand shop, but in the blink of an eye, the entire shop was covered with frost. Perfect combination. Really perfect combination. You, Dementor's nerve, 11 inches, boy, this wand is yours. Ollivander clapped his hands happily, suddenly thought of something, and continued. But one thing you need to know, this wand can't cast the Patronus charm, but don't worry too much, the Patronus charm's biggest role is to resist Dementors, and you don't need it, because this wand will protect you from being captured. Attacked by ghosts. Ollivander. Professor McGonagall stepped forward and asked solemnly. I wonder if this wand has Dementor properties, such as sucking people's happy emotions into darkness. No, Minerva, our Ollivanders wouldn't make such an evil wand. On the contrary, with the nerves of Dementors, this wand not only protects him from Dementors but also protects him from Dementors. It can make him more sensitive and yearning for happiness and beautiful things. People who are in the dark yearn for the light more, don't they? After hearing Ollivander's words, McGonagall breathed a sigh of relief. If Ollivander says it's true, the wand will be doing Artel a lot of good. I hope so, but thanks anyway, Ollivander. Professor McGonagall said, and was ready to take everyone away. Of course, Hermione and Artel paid 7 galleons each. Artel's wand should be worth well over 7 galleons, but Ollivander didn't increase the price. After leaving the wand shop, Professor McGonagall took them to Mrs. Malkin's robe shop to buy wizard robes, then went to Lishan bookstore to buy textbooks needed for the new semester, and then went to the next door to the cauldron shop to buy alchemy robes, crucible and brass balance for weighing. In addition to the textbooks required for the first grade, Hermione bought a lot of extra books, which made her not have enough money to buy a pet, and Artel didn't buy a pet because he thought it was too much trouble. In short, after they bought everything they needed, it was already past 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, that's it, Artel, Ms. Granger, the school starts on September 1st, you have to be at King's Cross Station before 11 o'clock that day to take the Hogwarts Express, remember to bring your tickets. After Professor McGonagall's instructions, she sent them to the Leaky Cauldron. She still had things to do. When they were shopping just now, something seemed to happen to Gringotts. Professor McGonagall wanted to take a look. After Professor McGonagall left, the Grangers looked at Artel, who was holding the cauldron and a pile of things, and asked, Artel, where does your family live? Why don't you put your stuff in my car first, and we can take you home first? Thank you, Mr. Granger, but no, my family should be waiting for me outside the pub now. Artel smiled at Mr. Granger's kindness, and then again, Hermione's parents were really nice people, much better than Harry's aunt and uncle. That's good, our family lives in Manchester. I'm a dentist and I have a private practice there. You can come to our house if you have time. Mr. Granger smiled, took out a business card, and put it in the pocket of Artel's suit. I will. Artel nodded. Manchester is in the northwest of London and Birmingham, not very far away. It only takes 2 or 3 hours by car or train. The four walked out of the Leaky Cauldron. Artel looked around. Jimmy and a few razor thugs were waiting at the corner of the street. Jimmy, hey, I'm here, Artel shouted, and Jimmy, who was smoking, heard the sound, turned his head and looked over, then choked off the cigarette and ran over. I actually bought so many things. The bodyguards behind Jimmy took the cauldron and the book and left with a wink. Jimmy muttered and looked at Granger and the others. Artel introduced him. They are the Grangers, and this is my classmate, Hermione Granger, who also goes to Hogwarts. Oh, she's a little witch. Jimmy's otherwise unconcerned expression turned serious by the way. Same as me. Artel nodded, a smile on Jimmy's face, and he took a business card from his pocket and handed it to Mr. Granger. Hello Mr. Granger, I'm Artel's uncle, here's my business card, we're in Birmingham. Artel coughed softly. Jimmy paused, smiled, and continued. Our family is doing some small business in Birmingham. If you don't mind, you can come to our house at any time. In fact, we have a small estate on the outskirts of Birmingham. Mr. Granger accepted the card and said he would definitely visit if he had the chance. After all, Hermione and Artel are both little wizards from Muggle families, which is a wonderful fate. Artel chuckled lightly from the side, and he also wanted to know how Hermione and the others would react when they came to his house. After all, Shelby Manor was not that big, maybe it was about the same size as Hogwarts. Of course, this is just a little bit of fun. In fact, Artel didn't feel that being a Shelby family would help him in the wizarding world. After all, for wizards, the power and money in the Muggle world were nothing special, they were easy to obtain. With a single confusion charm, the wealthy in the Muggle world can surrender their lifetime assets and wealth. Then, Mr. Granger, Mrs. Granger, and Hermione, see you later. Artel said goodbye to the three and led Jimmy to the corner. Mr. Granger looked at this scene and said, I think, Artel should come from a noble family. Yes, his Uncle Jimmy is obviously a big guy too, I can tell from the look in his eyes, but... Mrs. Granger glanced at Hermione and laughed. He seemed a little scared of Hermione. Who is not afraid of a witch? Mr. Granger laughed too. They didn't know, Jimmy was scared because Artel said Hermione was just like him, and Jimmy thought Hermione could summon that terrifying skeleton too. The Shelby family in Birmingham, I seem to have heard of it somewhere, it should be an ancient noble. Mr. Granger muttered and left with Mrs. Granger and Hermione. Hermione didn't feel much about Artel's identity, she just thought that this boy her age was very elegant and calm, much better than the boys in school who would only be jealous of her good studies. She did care about Artel's wizarding talent, though. Although in the wand shop, Hermione didn't quite understand what was going on, but she knew that Artel was a very talented little wizard, at least judging from the performance when buying the wand, much better than her talent. And she learned from Professor McGonagall that in addition to the little Muggle wizards, there are many little wizards from wizard families who have been exposed to magic since childhood and are extremely talented. Compared with the little Muggle wizards, they are born with an advantage. But I'll impress everyone. Hermione held the wand in her arms and glanced back in the direction Artel had disappeared, her eyes full of confidence. The car sped along the road, and Artel sat in the back seat, watching the wand in his hand. You, Voldemort's wand seems to be you, the nerves of a Dementor, that thing has nerves. I always thought that Dementors were spirits. Artel stroked the wand, and he could feel the biting chill coming from it. In addition to sucking human emotions, Dementors can also suck human souls, so this wand is very suitable for necromantic magic, and it is a very good wand for Artel. However, Artel could also vaguely feel the fear of this wand for himself, presumably because of the Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings contained most of Sauron's power, and Sauron was a demigod before his fall, which was indeed too advanced for a wand. Jimmy observed Artel through the rear-view mirror, saw him stroking a thin wooden stick, and asked involuntarily. Artel, is that your wand? Yes, it allows me to cast magic more easily. Artel nodded. At this stage, this wand is still very helpful to him. After all, not all his magic can be cast without a wand, and casting spells with a wand is more powerful and can save more magic power. Artel took out the elementary spell book and looked at it, then pointed his wand at Jimmy and waved it. Clean up. Wow, Jimmy cried out involuntarily. He felt a gust of wind blowing over him, and then he felt relaxed, as if he had just taken a shower. You can't hide the smell of perfume on your body, Aunt Nancy, don't thank me. Artel said something casually, and continued to read the book Elementary Spells. Perhaps Sauron's magical talent was too strong, and Artel mastered these primary spells without much effort. It seems that I still have the potential to be a scholar. Artel put the book down, waved his hand, and everything was loaded into the system space by him. He didn't do this before because he didn't want Professor McGonagall and Hermione to find out. Now there is no problem. Jimmy is a Muggle who doesn't understand anything. Even if he sees it, he will only think it is because of magic. And it was true, and Jimmy just sighed a few times about the magic of magic, and then left it behind. Along the way, Jimmy and Artel have been discussing the future of the Shelby family. He hoped that Artel could summon an army of undead to help the Razorists take complete control of Birmingham, and then expand the family business to London. This is also because Professor McGonagall warned them. According to Jimmy's original idea, it is to directly control the high-level personnel in England, and then use this as a foundation to look at Europe. After returning from London, Artel did not study with his cousins, nor did he train in horsemanship, shooting and combat, but has been studying magic. He built an underground laboratory in the manor, and usually no one else was allowed to approach it. Only Michael and Jimmy came to visit occasionally. In Saruman's notes, there is an orc potion that can turn animals into orcs. Artel, the material needed for the potion, is not available. But who gave Artel the Lord of the Rings? On the third day back in Birmingham, Artel returned to London, put on the Lord of the Rings, and followed a wizard into Diagon Alley. After that, Artel entered Nocturne Alley from Diagon Alley, looted all the dark wizard shops there, and obtained a lot of materials for black magic experiments and many precious potion raw materials. Artel packed everything in the system space, even Dumbledore couldn't find it. After returning to Birmingham, Artel began his own experimental project. After several unsuccessful attempts, Artel has been able to make the orc potion perfectly, and the initial test is a mouse he caught from the basement of the castle. Under the shocked eyes of Michael and Jimmy, the slap-sized mouse turned into a half-human high rat-headed orc in a black mist. Its eyes exude an evil red light, its fangs are sharp, and its claws glow with cold light, which is very ferocious and terrifying. This rat man looks like a race from some game, and it's very different from the disgusting orcs in The Lord of the Rings. And Artel doesn't remember hearing about similar potions in The Lord of the Rings, so it's most likely the product of a system transformation, and can't be treated as a half-orc in The Lord of the Rings. All in all, the results of this experiment were very successful. The reason why Artel tried to make an orc potion was because the powerful orcs needed to exchange for Saruman could only be made from the souls of half-orcs. Looking at Michael and Jimmy with nervous expressions, Artel stretched out his wand towards the Rathide. Although he was made by Artel, when faced with the threat of death, this rat-headed man still bared his teeth subconsciously, although it did not dare to do anything to Artel. Soul extraction. This is the signature magic of necromancers, and the effect is to extract the souls of other people. Of course, this magic was originally just to collect the souls of the dead, but after an evil necromancer transformation, it became a terrifying black magic that can absorb the magic of living people. The rat-headed man whimpered, and then lost his breath. Its soul, following Artel's wand, turned into a glowing bead, which was collected by Artel, and its filthy corpse was burnt to ashes by Artel's flames. After that day anyway, Michael and Jimmy shunned Artel's lab, and their fear of wizards deepened. In addition to orc potions, Artel also experimented with animal potions, iron skin potions, and invisibility potions. The animal potion can make the person who drinks the potion become the corresponding animal, and the iron potion can make the person who drinks the potion become copper skin and iron bones, feel no pain and is immune to some magic. As for the stealth potion, as the name suggests, drink the potion. The person can be invisible for half an hour. These potions are not found in the Harry Potter world, and if any of them is taken out, it will cause an uproar in the wizarding world. For these potions, Artel intends to make good use of it, to see if it can help his future plans. On August 30th, the system's twice-monthly free summons were also updated. However, Artel did not continue the good luck of the last time. This time, he took a cave troll and a roll of parchment that recorded the weather data. They were all useless, and he had no ties with the Lord of the Rings. He even unlocked it. No degree. The cave troll is a troll-like creature with a disgusting stench on its body. It is huge, thick-skinned, and not very smart. Artel cast it in the Forbidden Forest at Hogwarts. Deep down, let it fester on its own. Anyway, after a full month, Artel took Jimmy's car and came to King's Cross Station. At 10:40 a.m., Artel got off at King's Cross. He only brought one box of luggage, which contained some changed clothes, textbooks and props needed for school, and other important things were placed in the system space. Platform 9 3/4. Artel came to the middle of Platform 9 and Platform 10. He didn't rush in, but stood on the side and observed. At this time, many young wizards passed through Platform 9 3/4 under the leadership of their parents. Artel saw a lot of familiar faces, demolition expert Seamus Finnegan, the little black named Dean, and some familiar senior wizards. Artel. Just when Artel decided to pit, Hermione's excited voice came from behind. He turned his head to see Hermione waving at him, and the Grangers behind her were smiling at him. Mr. Granger, Mrs. Granger, Hermione, good afternoon. Artel greeted the trio. Nice to see you, Artel. Mr. Granger said with a smile. We're worried that Hermione has never been on a train alone. Don't worry, Mr. Granger, Hermione is a very smart girl, and I think we can take care of each other. Artel blinked at Hermione. Hermione pursed her lips, and her face seemed to be a little red. You are such a good boy. The more Mrs. Granger looked at Artel, the more she liked it, and Mr. Granger looked at the time and said, "Okay, it's almost time, it's time for you to get on the train. Goodbye Mom and Dad, I'll be back at Christmas." Hermione and the Grangers waved goodbye, and Artel said goodbye to both of them, before crossing platform 9 3/4 with Hermione. There were still many people on the platform at this time. A dark red steam train lay quietly on the tracks, with a sign hanging on the front of the train that said Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock. There was a lot of noise on the platform. Some little wizards were saying goodbye to their parents, and there were all calls everywhere, occasionally mixed with a few cat sounds. Artel and Hermione pushed through the crowd, got in a less traveled car, and sat in a box that wasn't occupied. After Artel put his suitcase away, he helped Hermione put her suitcase under the seat. Hermione's little head stuck out of the box and observed the little wizards. He didn't think they were anything special, so he went back to take your seat. "Artel, have you read books this month?" "I read several books at home, and tried using magic spells. I have mastered a few magic spells." Hermione looked at Artel with eagerness in her eyes and a hint of bragging and wanting to compete in her tone. "Really? Then you're awesome," Artel complimented Hermione before saying, "I also learned some magic, but some I find difficult, and I should not be able to use it now." Artel is telling the truth. He cannot use the Bone Dragon summoning and Lich King summoning in necromancy. In addition, Holy Light magic and Life magic are more difficult to study. Artel can only master the most basic spells. There are also relatively high-level elemental magic. In conclusion, Artel is not lying. There are a few spells in the book of elementary spells that are a bit difficult, and I haven't mastered them yet. Maybe we'll know the trick to casting them after class. Hermione comforted Artel, and then discussed with him some precautions when casting spells. These are too childish for Artel. Artel has read the book of elementary spells in 10 minutes and completely mastered it, so when discussing with Hermione, she pointed out a lot of things that were wrong with her. Hermione's mouth was pouting, and at first she looked unhappy, but slowly it turned into surprise, and later, Hermione looked at Artel with admiration in her eyes. They are also Muggle little wizards who are not taught by anyone. How can you be so good? The two chatted, the whistle of the train sounded, and then it started slowly. The door of the box was opened, and a chubby little wizard walked in blushing. It was Neville Longbottom. "Sorry, there are no other boxes available." "It's okay, you sit here." Hermione took the initiative to get up, gave up her seat, and sat down beside Artel blushing. "Thank you, my name is Neville Longbottom." Neville put the box away, took a toad out of it, and glanced at Hermione and Artel cautiously, fearing that they wouldn't like their pet. "It's called Ralph, and it's a very nice toad, I hope you don't mind." "It's okay, my name is Hermione, Hermione Granger." Neville was relieved that Hermione didn't show toad disgust like the other little girls. "Artel Shelby." Artel nodded to Neville, saying he didn't care about the fat toad either. "I think you'd better close the door, or the toad might run out." Artel reminded, and Neville patted his forehead, thanked him, and locked the box door. There was silence in the box for a while, and Hermione suddenly asked, "Are your parents wizards?" Neville looked up and found that Hermione was asking himself, so he nodded. "Yes, they are all wizards." Neville's parents were tortured into madness by the Death Eaters, and are still in the psychiatric department of St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Injuries and Injuries. He grew up with his grandmother, but he didn't plan to say this. Hermione also found that Neville seemed a little timid and unsociable, so she didn't say anything more, and then grabbed Artel and discussed with him about Hogwarts. Artel hadn't read the history of Hogwarts, but he had read the original book and the movie, so he knew a lot of things, but he could chat with Hermione. After the train started moving for a while, a woman pushing a snack cart passed their box. Artel's eyes lit up, and he quickly stopped her. "Ma'am, I want all these snacks." Artel doesn't care how Harry Potter can make friends with Ron after he bought all the snacks. Now he desperately needs these snacks to stop Hermione's mouth. This cute little girl is so curious that Artel needs to keep her quiet for a while. Artel bought everything in the snack cart for less than 17 silver ticks. He wasn't short of money now. When he ransacked Nocturne Alley before, Artel took all the money they had stored in the shop in addition to their magic items and ingredients. Now in his system space, Gingelong has piled up into a hill. BB beans, chocolate frog, bubble gum, licorice wand, crucible cake, pumpkin pie, strawberry milk pudding. Artel put all the snacks on the table and chairs and clapped his hands. Hermione, Neville, I'll treat you to a snack. It was noon now, and Hermione was also a little hungry, so she was welcome when she heard the words. She picked up a piece of pudding and ate it. Neville was a little embarrassed. Artel grabbed a handful of snacks and put it in his arms. He was a little surprised, then blushed and said thank you several times. Eat, we'll be friends in the future, you're welcome. Artel looked at him with a smile, and Neville pursed his lips and said thank you before opening a bag of pumpkin tarts and eating. Wow, it jumps. Hermione opened a box of chocolate frogs, and a chocolate frog jumped out of it, startling her. Hermione grabbed the chocolate frog. It was still struggling in her hand. Hermione was a little afraid to eat, and put her hand to Artel's mouth. Give you to eat. Thanks. Artel rudely opened her mouth, and Hermione flushed and pushed the chocolate frog into Artel's mouth, her fingers seeming to touch Artel's lips, making her face even redder. Here's a card. Hermione dared not look at Artel, but changed the subject and pulled out a card from it. Chocolate frogs come with pictures in the box, and a lot of people buy them to collect pictures, and they're all famous wizards. Neville was a little more courageous, and took the initiative to explain to Hermione. Hermione took out a picture of a brown-haired, seemingly knowledgeable male magician. Newt Scamander, fantastic zoologist, author of the best-selling Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, holder of the Order of Merlin 2nd Class, first wizard to capture Gellert Grindelwald. Quote. A look of surprise appeared on Hermione's face. It turns out that he is the author of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. I have read this book a few days ago, and it is very interesting to write. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them was one of the little wizarding textbooks requested by Hogwarts, and Hermione had read it in a month. But I seem to have heard the name Grindelwald somewhere. I remembered it. It was the extracurricular books I bought, Modern History of Magic, The Rise and Fall of Dark Magic, and The 20th Century Important, A Magical Incident. This person was mentioned above. Hermione looked at Artel and asked, do you know who this man is? I don't know, but since he was caught by Newt, I think he should be a dark wizard who specializes in bad things. Artel replied, swallowing all the chocolate in his mouth. That's right, he's one of the most evil dark wizards of all time. He's done a lot of terrible things, but in the end he was defeated by Dumbledore. Dumbledore, you know, the headmaster of Hogwarts. Quote. Hermione began to popularize Artel again. Artel smacked his lips. The chocolate frog just now was a little too sweet. He searched for it, tore open a bag of BB Duo beans, and took out one to taste. You know a lot. The teachers will definitely like you. It tastes like steak. It's not bad. Would you like to try it? Really? I'll try it. Hermione stopped worrying about the science career, and took a multi-flavored bean from the bag in Artel's hand. No, it's blueberry flavor. I'll try it again. Bah, what the hell is this flavor? Multi-flavor beans have a lot of flavor, and it's said to also smell like snot and earwax. Seeing Hermione's facial features twisted together, Neville wanted to laugh but didn't dare, so he gave her some science. Hermione spit out the multi-flavored beans and took a bite of the pumpkin pie before she recovered. I'll never eat this again. After she finished speaking, she glared at Artel, who was mocking her, and snorted, leaving him with a nice white eye. Because of Artel's reminder and snacks, Neville's Ralph didn't get lost, so Hermione didn't see Harry and Ron. The three were eating snacks in the carriage, and Neville was no longer as prudent as before. The three of them chatted all over the world. Artel didn't know much about the basics of the wizarding world, so he got a lot of information from Neville's mouth. And Artel also learned a very interesting thing, that is, Hermione is actually a year older than him. She is 12 years old this year. Because her birthday was in September, she didn't have a birthday before Hogwarts started last year, so she didn't get an admission letter. This also solved a small doubt in Artel's heart. That is why the twins Cedric and Weasley are obviously students of the same grade, but the former can sign up for the Triwizard Tournament, while the latter two rely on age-enhancing potions. Spotted by the Goblet of Fire. As time passed, the excitement of the little wizards on the train gradually subsided, and they all felt a little sleepy. Neville couldn't hold on at first, and collapsed on the chair with Leaf in his arms. Artel also felt a little bored, yawned, and closed his eyes to squint for a while. Hermione looked out the window and didn't know what to think. After about 10 minutes, she also fell into a deep sleep. A whistle woke Hermione. When she woke up, she found herself leaning on Artel's shoulder, and Artel's hand was on her waist, which made her face a little hot, and she sat up quickly. Hermione raised her head cautiously and saw that Artel was rubbing her eyes, as if she had just woken up. Shoulders are sore. Artel grunted and rubbed his shoulders. Hermione felt a little embarrassed and said in a low voice, "Sorry, I was asleep." Artel moved his body and smiled. "Why do you want to apologize? Actually, I wish you could sleep a little longer." What are you talking about?" Hermione blushed even more. She realized that Artel was doing it on purpose, so she glared at him, then thought of something, and looked across, which made her relieved that Neville was gone. "Neville went to the toilet, and I think we should hurry up and get to Hogwarts." Artel said something, stood up and started undressing. Hermione was too scared to speak. "Oh, we need to change into wizard robes." Artel put the suit jacket aside, took the wizard robe from the box and put it on, then put the suit in the box. Hermione didn't speak. She took off her coat, put on a wizard's robe, and sat down beside Artel again. "Your hat." After a while, Hermione finally couldn't take it anymore. "Sorry, I forgot about it." Artel took off his hat. Hermione seemed to see a cold light flashing at the brim of the hat, and was startled, and asked, "There seems to be something on your hat." Artel said nonchalantly, "Well, there are 2 blades sewn into the brim of the hat. It's a family tradition." What a strange tradition. Hermione didn't know why, so she mumbled. The door was opened, and Neville came back. "They say it's almost time for Hogwarts." Neville was a little excited, seeing that Artel and Hermione had changed into their wizard robes, and quickly changed them. "Where's your toad?" Artel took a look, but didn't see Neville hugging Ralph. Neville, who was changing his clothes, froze for a moment, and his speed increased a lot. After changing his clothes, he ran out. "Oops, I left it in the bathroom." Can his memory really remember spells? Hermione was skeptical, and Artel shrugged, saying he didn't know. Fortunately, Artel's reminder was timely, and when Neville arrived, Life didn't run too far, and when he brought Life back, the train also came in. "This platform is dark and small, and I don't know who designed it." The 3 got out of the car. Hermione pulled the box with one hand, then pursed her lips, and gently pulled Artel's sleeve with the other hand. She looked around. It was pitch black, only this platform was a little bright. First-year freshman here." A light came on in the darkness, and Artel saw Hagrid, the Hogwarts gamekeeper and keykeeper of Giant Blood. "Hagrid." A surprised voice came from the front. It was Harry Potter. Hagrid, with a smile on his bearded face, waved at Harry, and continued. "First-year freshmen come here. My God, he must be at least 3 meters tall." Hermione also saw Hagrid's face clearly, exclaimed, and gripped Artel's sleeve even tighter. The first-year freshmen followed behind Hagrid and walked towards the darkness in the distance. They were walking on a path with trees on both sides, which was dark and gloomy. Artel originally wanted to make a fluorescent light, but the little girl Hermione seemed to be a little scared, and kept dragging him tightly, and followed him closely. Artel didn't want to illuminate. After walking like this for more than 10 minutes, Hagrid's voice came from the front. "Turn that corner and we'll see Hogwarts." Everyone quickened their pace, and after turning a corner, they all exclaimed. "In front of it is a huge lake. I don't know if it is because of the dark sky. The whole lake looks pitch black. On the other side of the lake is a hillside, and a majestic castle stands on the hillside. From a distance, the lights are brilliant, the stars are covered, and it is very beautiful." "Is that Hogwarts?" Hermione asked quietly. "Well, relax." Artel nodded and dragged Hermione forward. "There can be no more than 4 people on each boat. This is a rule passed down a long time ago. First-year students have to take a boat through the Black Lake, because the 4 great wizards who founded Hogwarts were like this." Hagrid told everyone, but everyone got on the boat without saying a word. On Artel's boat, he, Hermione, Neville, and a little girl he didn't know looked familiar. Hermione asked, knowing that her name was Lavender Brown. The boat was enchanted to move forward automatically. They took them on the lake for about 20 minutes, passed through the ivy curtain, passed through a dark underground tunnel, and finally came to the underground entrance of a castle. Hagrid took everyone off the ship, checked them, and handed them over to Professor McGonagall, who had been waiting for a long time. Professor McGonagall saw Artel and Hermione in the crowd with a smile on her face, but then turned serious again. "Welcome to Hogwarts," Professor McGonagall said to the little wizards. Her voice was very cold, and there was an inexplicable feeling that she was very strict. "The opening banquet is about to begin. Before you enter the auditorium and take your seats, you still have one thing to do, and that is the sorting ceremony. After the sorting ceremony, you can take your seats at your own college." After Professor McGonagall told them some basic information about the 4 academies, as well as some rules they need to abide by and the guidelines for deducting points, Sheeran turned around and tapped lightly with his wand. The gate of the castle opened automatically, and the braziers inside automatically burned one by one. The entire passage is brightly lit. This is a spiral staircase leading upstairs. Professor McGonagall walked in with everyone, followed the steps upstairs, and finally stopped in front of the entrance of the auditorium. "Now, form a single line and keep quiet." Professor McGonagall said something. Everyone lined up as she asked, and then Professor McGonagall opened the door, and everyone followed her footsteps through the foyer and into the auditorium. "Wow, wow, my God!" Exclamations like that sounded in Artel's ears. Even Hermione tugged at his wizard robe harder, stunned by the magnificent castle hall in front of him. In fact, even Artel was a little shocked. Although he has seen the movie, to be honest, the castle in the movie is much worse than the one in front of him. There were 4 oversized long tables in the auditorium, and the senior Hogwarts seniors sat at the tables and looked at them with interest. Tens of thousands of candles were floating in the air of the auditorium. The warm candlelight illuminated every corner and saw less than the slightest shadow. The table was filled with gold plates and goblets, as well as matching silver cutlery, and there was also a long table in front of the auditorium, where the professors of Hogwarts sat. Artel saw many familiar faces, including the kind-faced headmaster Dumbledore, Professor Snape at Tsunere, and Quirrell in a hood. Through the candles, you can see that the sky of the auditorium is like the Milky Way. The stars twinkle, the silver ribbons dance, and there are meteors passing by from time to time, which is beautiful. The little wizards were stunned. Until Professor McGonagall called them a few times, brought them to the front of the auditorium, and stopped in front of a chair. Afterwards, Professor McGonagall put a pointed wizard hat on the chair, which looked worn, with patches and stains in some places. Everyone in the auditorium was looking at the hat, and Hermione wanted to speak, but felt Artel tugged at her sleeve. Then, in the surprised eyes of the little wizards, the hat seemed to be stretched and moved, and then began to sing. After Artel listened with a stiff expression, the hat began to salute everyone in the auditorium. The seniors and professors began to applaud, as did the little wizards. After the applause stopped, Professor McGonagall walked up with a roll of parchment and said, "Now, the freshman whose name I read comes up, sits in a chair, puts on a hat, and waits for the sorting." Professor McGonagall glanced at the parchment. Hannah Abbott. Artel looked at the girl. It was a girl with blonde hair. Her face was a little red. She took a deep breath and walked up cautiously. Hannah put on her hat, and after a while Artel heard the hat shout, "Hufflepuffs." The little girl seemed relieved, and there was applause and cheers from Hufflepuff's table, and she put down her hat and walked over there. "Susan Burns." Professor McGonagall continued to shout. The little wizards were assigned to their own academies, and soon it was Hermione's turn. She glanced at Artel first, then took a deep breath and walked up. The sorting hat was silent for a while, and seemed to be communicating with Hermione, but Artel couldn't hear him, only the hat moved twice and shouted, "Gryffindor." There were cheers from the Gryffindor table. Hermione put down the sorties, looked at Artel with a hint of hope in her eyes, and ran to the Gryffindor table. After Hermione, Ron and Harry were also assigned to Gryffindor. Soon, it was Artel's turn. Artel Shelby. Professor McGonagall looked at him with encouragement in his eyes, and even Dumbledore, who was sitting behind him, straightened up a little. Obviously he had heard about Artel from Professor McGonagall. Artel stepped forward, put on the sorting hat, and sat down in the chair. Well, what a powerful talent, an evil and dark force, a natural dark wizard. I have never seen a wizard with such a terrible talent, surpassing the 4 founders, surpassing Merlin, surpassing Dumbledore. The voice of the Sorting Hat rang in Artel's ear. Hidden in the depths of his heart is an amazing ambition, but he knows how to hide himself, a perfect Slytherin. The Sorting Hat muttered in Artel's ear, then changed his voice. If I were a wizard, I think I should send you to Azkaban. Trust me, child, Azkaban is your final destination. The Sorting Hat doesn't seem to be joking. But I'm just a hat. Godric Gryffindor told me to cherish every student. The Sorting Hat fell silent, its voice ringing in Artel's ear. I think you'll do a lot in Slytherin, maybe when people want to send you to Azkaban, they can't. The Sorting Hat made its decision, and its voice echoed throughout the auditorium. Slytherin. Cheers sounded, and Artel calmly put down the Sorting Hat. At the last moment, he used the Lord of the Rings to induce the Sorting Hat. The Sorting Hat would not tell Dumbledore the truth about him. Artel left his seat. He saw some loss in Professor McGonagall's eyes, but more worry. Hermione's expression was a little annoyed. Her mouth was closed and she looked unhappy. It seemed that she was sad that the two of them were not in the same academy. Artel walked to the Slytherin table and sat down, and some seniors and sisters came to greet him. Draco moved closer to Artel and said, "My name is Draco Malfoy. You should have heard my name, at least you should have heard of Malfoy. You seem to be called Shelby, right? I don't remember which wizarding family had that name. I'm a Muggle wizard. As for what you said about Malfoy, sorry, never heard of it." Artel looked at Decola and didn't give him a good look. This guy is full of pure blood supremacy, and he is very discriminatory against Muggles and mixed blood. This cannot be changed. There is no need for him to be friendly with him. Malfoy's face became a little ugly, but thinking that it was in the auditorium, it was not easy to do anything, just snorted. Artel left him alone, and if Malfoy applied his so-called pure blood supremacy to himself, he wouldn't mind letting Malfoy know what Shelby was. From the rise of the Shelby family to the present, they were killed with razors and bullets, paved the way with the blood of the enemy, forged glory with the bones of the enemy, and died on the way of Shelby's rise. Voldemort murdered tens of thousands of Muggles in order to form the Inferi army in the first years of his fortune, and now the Inferi are still guarding the Slytherin locket in the Inferi Lake. Artel pretended to watch the sorting ceremony, but actually put his mind on the system. Ding! The host successfully joined Slytherin, completed the current main quest, and received a reward of 100 plot points. Main quest update. Current mission. Rise to fame. Mission objective. The reputation of the Dark Lord will start from Slytherin, at least add 150 points to Slytherin this semester and win the Academy Cup. Quest reward. Gandalf's spell notes, 1500 plot points. Note: when the mission is settled, every time the host adds 1 point to Slytherin, he can get 10 plot points as a reward. If you don't get 150 points, the mission will fail and there will be no reward. So, if I can add 1000 points, I can directly get 10,000 plot points. Artel thought about it and thought it was unlikely. Even if he killed Voldemort, Dumbledore wouldn't give him 1000 points. And according to the original plot, Gryffindor won this year's Academy Cup. When the period ends, Dumbledore will definitely find an excuse to give Gryffindor extra points. I have to find a way to make Harry and Rondo deduct some more. Just divide. Have to turn more Gron into less Gron. Artel glanced at Harry and the others pityingly, and then at Hermione, feeling a little embarrassed. I'm sorry, dear Hermione, I'm going to backstab you Gryffindor. I just hope that Hermione, who worked hard at the end, doesn't cry. The sorting ceremony was over soon, and the Lavender Brown who was on the boat with them also entered Gryffindor. She was one of the few girls who entered Gryffindor and should be roommates with Hermione. Realizing this, Artel remembered that this familiar little wizard was Ron's ex-girlfriend. Hermione was also jealous because of her. Artel glanced at Hermione and saw that she was looking straight at him, pursing her lips, looking a little aggrieved. Artel smiled slightly and winked at her. Hermione pouted, sprawled on the table, and turned her head to the side. To be honest, Artel doesn't remember having such a deep relationship with Hermione. After thinking about it, it may be because of the short time on the train, and Hogwarts is a strange place for Hermione. And most people are used to being with familiar people in unfamiliar places. After the sorting ceremony, Dumbledore told the little wizards some precautions. Barabara said a lot, and then he clapped his hands, and the 4 long tables immediately appeared full of food. The dinner party begins. Artel wiped his hands with a napkin, took a piece of steak gracefully, and ate it slowly. Hermione looked at him across the table, not very happy, but she was hungry all afternoon, so she picked up a cream pudding. Beside her, Ron ate a chicken leg in one hand and ate it in big mouthfuls. His mouth was full of oil, and he made a humming sound. Hermione frowned and looked at him, and then looked at the elegantly cutting Artel, the steak, sighed helplessly. I want to go to Slytherin. After eating, Dumbledore led everyone to sing the school song, and then told all the students that they were not allowed to go to the corridor on the right on the 4th floor, and then announced the end of the dinner. Under the leadership of the prefect, the freshmen headed to the dormitory of their academy one after another. Hermione took the opportunity to sneak up to Artel's side, told him to have dinner with him the next morning, and then ran away with a snort. Artel followed the Slytherin students all the way down, and finally came to the entrance of the Slytherin lounge in the basement. Along the way, Prefect Gemma Farley has been introducing Slytherin, first introducing the symbol of the serpent, and then denying some rumors, such as Slytherin is a dark wizard reserve, Slytherin likes to study black magic, Slytherin only recruits pure blood, and so on. According to him, these are all the jealousy and slander of Slytherin by other academies. Of course, he does not deny that Slytherin has a tendency to recruit descendants of famous wizards, but in fact, although Slytherin has recruited a lot of pure-blood wizards, there are also a lot of mixed-blood and muggle wizards. After entering the lounge, the prefect assigned the freshman dormitories. Men and women are separated, and Artel's roommates are Malfoy and his two younger brothers, Crabbe and Goyle, which makes him feel a little interesting. After Gemma finished dividing the dormitory, she specifically told the little wizards to help each other, putting Slytherin's honor first, and Balabara said it for a while before letting everyone go to rest. Artel took the lead in the dormitory, choosing the bed with the best location. Malfoy, who was a step late, snorted and gave Crabbe and Goyle a look. The three of them came over and looked at him maliciously. Malfoy looked at Artel proudly and said, Shelby, right, listen clearly. Everything in this dorm will be obeyed by me. Haven't you heard of the Malfoy family? Trust me, you will know in the future. I'm sorry, I already know what Malfoy is, that Death Eater family. I heard your father was the #1 Death Eater. I wonder why he wasn't put in Azkaban. Artel looked at Malfoy playfully, then glanced at Crabbe and Goyle beside him, and asked curiously. What, are the three of you planning to form a small group of Death Eaters at Hogwarts? What did you say? Malfoy shivered a little, and said to the two tall and fat little brothers. Beat him. Let this mudblood who has lived in the Muggle world since he was a child see the power of a wizarding family. Crabbe and Goyle rushed forward obediently, while Malfoy took a step back, pulled out his wand and prepared to chant. Ah, Artel sneered and didn't say much, just pulled out his wand and faced the three of Malfoy. Dementor's Kiss. This is a skill that Artel unlocks unintentionally. The core of his wand is the nerve of the Dementor, and he draws the power of the Dementor through the necromantic soul, forming a kind of magic similar to the Dementor's Kiss. As Artel's staff flashed a cool white light, a huge Dementor appeared in the bedroom. The entire dormitory slowly began to form frost, and the Dementor floated in front of the three of Malfoy, revealing its hideous mouthparts, and began to suck their emotions. Artel watched the three of them turn pale and withdrew the magic. With a thud, the three of them fell to the ground in unison, shivering constantly. The expressions on their faces were very subtle, and their eyes were empty, as if they were dead and alive. In short, like a mental retardation. Now, should you know what a Shelby is? For the sake of roommates, I have a piece of life advice for you: never mess with a Shelby. Also, I don't want to hear the words mudblood in the future. Artel sneered as he looked at Malfoy lying on the ground, his face pale, and took off his clothes and went to bed. The next morning, Malfoy and the others slowly opened their eyes. After the Dementors disappeared last night, they didn't have the strength to get up, and finally fell asleep on the ground in a daze. Even after a night, they still felt a little weak in their legs and feet. Malfoy, remember what I said, I'll be the boss in this bedroom from now on. Of course, as long as you don't provoke me, I generally don't care about you. Artel got dressed and put his wand around his waist, ready to go out to dinner. Malfoy shivered, and he opened his mouth, not daring to say anything. He will never forget how he felt last night. It seems that I will never be happy again, surrounded by endless darkness and cold, unable to think, unable to struggle, only to feel hope that a little bit will leave me. Watching Artel leave, Crabbe seemed to be drowning and suddenly breathed in fresh air. After taking a sharp breath, he said with a trembling voice, "I think it's a Dementor." Malfoy's body trembled, glared at Crabbe, and said viciously, "No, no little wizard can control a Dementor." Gore swallowed his saliva, looked at the two of them carefully, and suggested, "Maybe some kind of horrible black magic. I think we should tell the teacher." "Tell the teacher? Are you trying to embarrass me? I don't believe there are Dementors. And how could he, a Muggle-born wizard, use black magic?" Malfoy clenched his fists, but remembering the experience last night, he couldn't control his chills. "Is it really a Dementor?" Malfoy thought he was crazy, and he planned to go back at Christmas and tell his father that it was better not to provoke this dangerous guy until then. "Don't provoke him for now," Malfoy instructed the two little brothers, then looked at the time, and snorted. "Now let's change clothes first, and then go to dinner. No one is allowed to say this to the outside world, or I want him to look good." Artel left the dormitory and saw a girl of his age in the Slytherin common room. Tan hair, with a hint of arrogance, looks okay, but the eyes are a little uncomfortable. Artel knew about this girl. Her name was Pansy Parkinson, who seemed to be having an affair with Draco for a while, but was unable to marry him in the end. This girl was a staunch supporter of Draco. Pansy was waiting for Malfoy. When he heard someone come downstairs, he raised his head happily, and when he saw it was Artel, he showed a look of disgust. Although the prefect said that Slytherin does not only recruit pure-blood wizards, but in the opinion of many people, some people do not deserve to be here. "That's right, I think so too, especially those little bitcha who think they're superior." Artel replied without looking at her and left the lounge. Pansy's face flushed, and she didn't know what to say for a while. The swear words she had been exposed to since she was a child were nothing but despicable, filthy mudbloods. She had never heard the word bitcha, but without Artel explaining it, she naturally knew the meaning of the word. "I won't let you go." Pansy endured for a long time, but finally she couldn't hold back and screamed. Artel had left the basement at this time and came to the auditorium to prepare breakfast. He sat down at the long table in Slytherin, and several senior snakes saw him and smiled politely. Of course, most people just gave him a cold look. And the little Slytherin wizard, who was also a first year, just glanced at him. No one greeted him, and no one came over. After all, everyone was unfamiliar. Of course Artel wouldn't care about it. Living at Shelby Manor since he was a child, he had few friends. "Breakfast," Artel shouted at the plate in front of him, and various breakfasts appeared in front of Artel. He chose a piece of toast, a boiled potato, a glass of hot milk, and 2 fried eggs. "It's so convenient here." Artel took a sip of milk and sighed, and since the house elf was good at cooking, the taste of these breakfasts was still very much in line with his taste. A simple boiled potato. Artel has a different flavor. Artel was eating breakfast when Hermione walked into the Great Hall. The wizards in Gryffindor greeted her enthusiastically, and several first-year wizards also waved to her to go eat together, but Hermione saw Artel alone. She paused in her footsteps, then smiled apologetically at the other little wizards, and sat down beside Artel. "Breakfast." Hermione tapped the table and some breakfast appeared in front of her. "It doesn't look like you should be sitting here." Artel turned to look at Hermione. The little girl seemed to be in good spirits, and Artel could see her excitement and nervousness. "I like," Hermione said stubbornly, picked up a piece of toast and ate it quietly. Since Hermione is willing to accompany her, Artel will not refuse, but before he can speak, Pansy, who is diagonally opposite, speaks yin and yang. "Humph, you can as long as you like it. This is Slytherin's place. Why are you a Gryffindor here? You don't understand politeness at all. No wonder you are with that mudblood." Pansy didn't finish his sentence. Artel had raised his hand and pointed his wand at her. Lock tongue and throat. A ray of light flashed, and the expression on Pansy's face changed from consternation to panic. Her tongue stuck to her upper jaw, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't make a sound. The little wizards around were in an uproar and jumped up in fear. With a face full of headaches, Gemma Level hurried over. "It's just too much." Gemma murmured and threw a spell with her wand to stop, but unfortunately it didn't work. "This is a curse. How could you, a first-year wizard? Gemma looked at Artel in amazement. He didn't expect that he couldn't unravel the spell of a first-year wizard, which made him feel a little humiliated as a prefect. What happened here quickly caught the attention of the professors, and Dumbledore, Snape, and Professor McGonagall all came over. Snape glanced at the cursed Pansy with a strange expression on his face, and then with a tap of his wand, Pansy found that his tongue had recovered. "Ah, you muddy," Pansy yelled, but was reprimanded by Snape. "Shut up, Miss Pansy Parkinson, I don't want to hear that word again. Or you'll be punished severely for it." Snape stared at Pansy, startling her, and said nothing more. Then Snape looked at Artel and asked, "Where did you learn this curse from?" "Lock tongue and throat is a spell he invented when he was in school, and it has not been passed down. I researched it myself." Artel didn't lie. He only knew Snape's spells. He only knew that spells would not work to cast spells. However, Artel had Soren's talent anyway, especially in black magic and evil spells, which was even more amazing. In this world, Artel is second, no one dares to be first. So he just thought about it a little, and he recovered the entire spell and was able to cast it successfully, which was easier for him than drinking water. You have to reach for the water, and the healing spell only needs to think about it. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.